How's it going, Saints fans? Steve Geller, Jeff Nowak, bringing you another edition Inside Black and Gold. I'm back in Louisiana still. Nowak, you are kicking it in California with the Saints at training camp. How things been going for you weather-wise out there? I don't think there's been any rain, huh?
We had some clouds. Does that count?
Some clouds.
Yeah, it's cloudy right now. You wouldn't know it because the window's closed behind me. I was actually going to go. I was considering sitting out by the pool to record this, but it's like 8 a.m. and it's actually kind of cold. I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of cold. But yeah, so I'm in the room, and when I say cold, it's like 60s. But like that's pretty cold when you're like trained for 98, like I had been before I got here.
Yeah, I can't imagine us getting to the 60s at all around here.
No, right. It would feel like my wife would be wearing a sweatshirt and a jacket over it. Yeah, and complaining about global warming. But yeah, so it's a day off today. Deuce, Haas, and myself are going to go golfing. I haven't golfed in a long time. I used to golf a lot when I lived in South Carolina because there's a golf course every 10 feet. But since I've lived down here, I found myself too poor to golf. And also, like, every time it rains, the courses just fill up. So if it's rained in the last 3 days, the courses are garbage anyway. So it's not even worth the money. So I think I'm going to lose all respect. If I've gained any respect of the legend Deuce McAllister over the last 2 weeks, I will lose it immediately once he sees me duck hook a ball into the woods on my opening drive. I think I just might hit irons today, but we'll keep it going. But yeah, some good food.
I know there'll be plenty of golf course Facebook content for WWL.
No, you don't need that. You don't need that. No. I'm used to, my golf strategy is usually keep drinking until I don't care anymore. I don't get better. But I don't think we're going to be drinking out there, so I'm just going to have to focus on my game. But we're here to talk about Saints football. 7 days of practice, so we've officially had a week of practice, 3 consecutive days of pads. People are getting testy. People are fighting. Chris Olave in particular has been a feisty one.
I'm glad you brought that up right away because I wanted to ask you the definition of fighting right now. There's not fists being thrown; it's a lot of pushing and shoving, huh?
I think Chris did throw a punch. I think he threw one, but not like a half-hearted kind of bedazzling of a helmet, right? Chris, the funniest part was I wouldn't even call it a fight, but he and Alontae Taylor were going at it in one-on-ones, and Alontae was holding him a little bit, which I we'll talk about this. One-on-ones are so tilted toward the wide receiver in terms of it's so much easier for the wide receiver than it is the cornerback. I'm going to give the cornerback some leeway in terms of you can be a little handsy because I just want to see you plaster and stick. And so yeah, fine. He's holding a little bit. You got a 3-way go with no sideline help, no safety help, nothing in the middle of the field to help the cornerback out. Get over it. But he was calling back. He was he's holding like a bitch. He said it 6 times. And then he looked over to the defense. He was like, don't clap for that. He was having a day. I don't know if maybe he was a little pissed off because his hip still hurt from the day before or whatever.
Right, cranky.
But, yeah, he was fighting. But no, there's been a good bit of that. Peyton Turner was involved in one. Dallin Holker was involved in one, which is a bold move because you don't want to make him angry. Thank you for laughing. Yeah, I think there was one Cedric Wilson and Alontae Taylor the day before. So yeah, it's getting a little antsy in their pantsy, right?
I guess
that's what training camp's about.
Good time for a day off for him then.
Exactly. I think that's exactly what it is. 3 days in a row in pads after not really getting hit. I think everyone's adjusting. Even you're an NFL player, I get it. You've been hit your whole life in terms of you played football. I think after going however many months without getting hit, there's a little adjustment to remind yourself that's what football feels like, right? Especially when you're a smaller guy like Chris. He got it wasn't him. It was Rashid the other day. Carl Granderson just read an end around and Rashid was coming through, and you're not allowed to tackle guys, right? But when you're Carl Granderson and the guy you're going at is Rashid Shaheed, doesn't take much. And he just kind of gave him a forearm shiver. It was like cross-check in hockey. And Rashid just went flying. And that's kind of, you're a wide receiver getting hit by a gigantic defensive end. That's going to happen. But we're going to go through this segment just for a quick, what we're going to get through. We're going to do kind of a rundown here. We're going to talk about some injuries. We're going to talk about some stuff that stood out, offensive line, defensive line. That's going to be the first segment. Second segment, there's also going to be some regular scheduled breaks so I can cough, because I've had this terrible cough. I've been having terrible allergies, and you can probably see it in my eyes. Like, my eyes are watering because, like, I'm trying not to cough constantly. Anyway, so if you see any weird cuts, that's what it is. So we're going to talk about that. Second segment, I want to talk about, okay, so 3 points, like 3 things that have stood out to me that we're going to dive into. We're going to hear some audio. I have a quasi-exclusive interview with John Benton. I say quasi because Mike Triplett's also there. But if you didn't know any better, you'd think it was only one person because we sound the same. And so we can go through that. We can talk about, it's a really good example of how we have the exact same voice. Although right now we do sound a little different because I'm like super congested with the allergy. So I almost sound like a normal person. And then, so we'll talk about that. One position that I have some serious concerns about, and it's not the offensive line. Ooh. Final segment, we're going to go through some bold predictions. Stuff that, is a little off the wall, but could happen is really what I'm talking about. Like, it's not even stuff that I think is going to happen. It's stuff that I think could happen. And that's why it's a bold prediction. But let's dive into the injuries right now. And, when you hear this list of injuries and people who are out, it's concerning, right? So you have Marshawn Lattimore dealing with a hip flexor, Brian Brzee dealing with a foot injury, Nick Saldiveri dealing with a calf injury. And these are all guys that have missed now multiple days of practice. Trajan Jeffcoat dislocated his elbow. I expect him to be out for a while. Equinemius St. Brown had a hamstring injury. He's been out the last 2 days. Cedric Wilson missed Wednesday with a hamstring injury. Bob Means missed with a shin injury. Then also Demario Davis and Tommy Hudson left early on Wednesday with hamstring injuries. So that's a long list. We've gotten through 7 days of practice. And it's a concerning amount of like soft tissue stuff. And so I'm starting to wonder if, and I've talked to Deuce about this, like, so you go out here because it's like, hey, it's not as hot. I wonder if they're having an issue with players maybe not adequately hydrating because, you go out, it's not that hot. You're not sweating as much and you think, I'm good. And then all of a sudden you don't have the electrolytes, you don't have the vitamins, and then you tweak your hamstring. I didn't even mention Kendre Miller. Kendre Miller's obviously been out. I kind of put him on the list with the pup guys. If they had known he was only going to get through one set of drills, they probably would have put him on the pup list to start camp. Like, Jawan Johnson seems to be closer to coming back off the pup list than Kendre Miller in terms of we haven't seen him get any work. We have seen him at practice. We saw Marshawn at practice as well. And we've seen the pup guys working out. Brian Brzee seems like he's close to coming back. But, yeah, I mean, it's tough. Like, if your idea was, hey, they're going to go out to California, good weather, they're going to avoid injuries, that has not happened.
That's an interesting point you bring up. Obviously, you still got to hydrate properly. And I guess you're getting a little deceived maybe by that California coolness.
Yeah, and DeMario, he dealt with a hamstring injury last year too, if you recall. He missed several days. That's why they brought in Jalen Smith. Like that was right. A move they made because I think there was a little concern that maybe that would linger. It doesn't sound like this one is as significant. I think it was more like, okay, we got a day off tomorrow. If you tweaked anything, we're not going to take any chances on it. But yeah, I mean that's when you have to watch. And we've seen the injuries kind of make an impact. And I don't know, like there's a certain level of, hey, you miss a day of practice. That's not the end of the world because it allows the Saints to get a good look at some of the other players, right? And Anthony Orji on Wednesday.
I've been hearing he's standing out.
Yeah, I thought DeMarco Jackson also had a solid day.
Okay.
Like a lot of pressure, and they were part of it. Like we're going to talk about this, but when you hear pressure, when you hear like offensive line and sacks, it's not all just like, oh, Trevor Penning sucks. Right, like that. Like people are just gonna like be like, "Oh, the offensive line struggled. I'm gonna look at the left side, at the right tackle, right, because he's the guy we're worried about." Now, a lot of the pressure was up the middle, and one of the absences from yesterday we didn't talk about as much because it wasn't an injury. Is Eric McCoy got a day off, and I asked Dennis Allen about that because last year when we talked to Eric, we were like, "Hey, why don't you get veteran rest days like everybody else?" And he said his philosophy is if QB1 is on the field, I'm on the field. If he's taking snaps, I'm the one giving him the ball. And, it sounds like, and I asked Dennis Allen about this, it sounds like that philosophy has been changed. And I next time we talk to Eric, I'm going to have to ask him how he, if he pushed back on that at all, because I imagine he did, because he's just not the type of person who wants his reps managed. But he has dealt with some soft tissue stuff over the last couple of years, and they have him on that kind of veteran program. DA did say like that list of veteran program guys who have to have their reps managed is a lot shorter than it's been in the past, which is, you take Ryan Ramczyk's name off that list, take Jimmy Graham's name off that list. And really you just have like a couple players on offense and then a couple players on defense, the veterans on defense who might be getting days off, guys like Tyrann Mathieu, like Cam Jordan, and even then they probably don't want it, but you have to be smart about it. But with Eric McCoy out, who's the backup center? It's Lucas Patrick. Now, the problem there is Lucas Patrick is also the starting left guard right now because Nick Saldiveri is out. Right. So you shift Lucas Patrick over to center because I do think there's good value in getting him first team center reps. But what does that mean? Who the hell is your first team guard? And right now, that third string guard is one of Kyle Hergel, who was a rookie UDFA, Ali Udoh, who was a left tackle, who's a tackle, and Landon Young, who was a tackle. Shane Lemieux did not get in that mix. And I think that's pretty telling. Landon Young has now played 3 different positions in a week of camp.
and Lemieux is just coming back from an injury too, right?
He is, but he should have been in. Like if they were considering, if he was in a conversation to be the first string left guard,
yeah,
he would have been in there. So I don't know if maybe he's focusing on right guard, doing something else. But I thought it was a good look for Kyle Hergel. Like I think that's a good indicator that he's probably going to be a premium practice squad guy, like an early look practice squad guy. And it's a good look for Landon Young because I've said like Landon Young is the new James Hurst, and the more you can do, and that's a positive for these guys, right? Like the fact that they can take a look at other positions and make an impact. I think like, hey, you've probably heard a lot about how the pass rush was dominating.
Right.
When you have a backup center and a left guard who you've never even seen before in that rotation, along with rookie left tackle, new right tackle, the only guy on that line that you're like, yeah, he should be solid is Cesar Ruiz.
Yeah.
So like that's going to blow a lot of stuff up on its own. So I wouldn't overreact to the pass rush, but the pass rush has been good either way. That rotation is telling because I just think that they have, we're going to hear from John Benton. One of the things he said was, you have to go 8-9 deep on the offensive line, Nick. You have to have 8 or 9 quality players because you're going to end up using those players. And I don't think they have that right now.
Yeah, I'll tell you, definitely back in Louisiana, hearing the news about, the D-line, dominating more often against the offensive line. There's a, growing concern because going into the season, obviously offensive line was looked at as a big problem or a big question mark because of, you knew you had basically 3 new starters along the line. But you explaining too that right now with so many guys kind of rotating in that maybe don't get too worked up over it just yet. And I know we heard Deuce McAllister, I think it was on Sports talk about that back as well. He's like, I'm not concerned about it I'm not concerned right now, but kind of like but we'll wait and see what happens because it could become something that's an issue.
Yeah, we'll talk about it more. We'll talk about it more in the second segment in terms of like we're still early in the offensive line process right now. And I think part of it is, you gotta kind of live with the mistakes because you got to learn from those mistakes. I do wonder if you're not getting the level of work on the offense that you'd like to be getting because all of your plays are getting blown up. And I don't know, it's tough. One guy who, again, a guy I thought came on strong in yesterday's practice, and we've got some clips flashed up here from Mike Haas. We saw some wide receiver one-on-ones, some fullback, running back, linebacker one-on-ones, safety one-on-ones. Alontae Taylor, I do have to give him credit because in the episode earlier this week, I had him on my list of slow starters. And I think that was fair. I think it was fair to have him on that list. I don't think he's responding to me, but I will give him credit. He did seem to wake up a little bit, and he seemed like he had an edge in this most recent practice that I don't know if I saw early on, and that's good. Like I need to see him kind of grow into that role at the slot corner position, and I need him to be that tone setter. Like that's what I don't know if you saw the C.J. Gardner-Johnson tirade about the Madden rankings that
hilarious,
called out
typical CJ.
Yeah. Well, like CJ is a crazy person, right? And I think that did great on people after a while. But one of the things that he was able to bring is an edge. Like he's the guy you didn't want to face, right? He's the guy who was going to go out there and make impact plays, get in the head of the other team. And I don't know if we've had that the last 2 years, particularly not from the slot corner position. So I want that. I want that guy who's going to play with that little chip and, be a little chippy. There's two different types of chips. Get some dip on that chip, as Cam Jordan likes to say.
Yeah, to me, I always thought like CD Deuce was like the NFL's Draymond Green.
Yeah. Pat Beverly is what I would go with. I would go Pat Beverly. Because I don't think, Draymond, what makes him special is like, yeah, he's a crazy person. You get in your head, but he also plays like he can play 5 different positions, right? Like I don't know if Alontae is there. I think he needs to specialize. He needs to be really good in that one role. Oh no,
I was saying CD Deuce was Draymond.
That's a good point. But it was same logic. I
hear you, right.
I still go with the Pat Bev because CD's a smaller guy. If he was an offensive line, or if he was like a defensive lineman, I'd give you a Draymond. But.
So I guess you're saying though that Alontae's being a lot more vocal and talking shit on the field.
He was on Wednesday.
Okay.
And I think the guy I saw on Wednesday is the guy I want to see more of.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, then I feel a lot better about him in the slot. Because I just think the slot, obviously there's a skill set involved and you have to understand how to play in the slot. But I also think there's a mentality that you have to play within the slot that, it just, because you are an island in the slot and you have to be able to go both. We have to be able to play both directions. You have to line up against bigger players, tight ends, running backs, and you have to hold up. And you're almost always going to be undersized in those matchups. So you have to kind of find a way to fight through it. And that's why I think a lot of corners don't want to play in the slot, right? That's why you end up seeing a lot of safeties try to get into that slot. Like CJ was a safety. And so you just, I don't know, that mentality that you have to have, and you have to be consistent with it. Hopefully we can see more days like Wednesdays. And again, like we talked about the one-on-one reps. I tweeted the clips of Alontae in those one-on-one reps. The breakdown after practice on YouTube has all those clips in there if you want to go look at it. But, people were like, oh, he held here. I don't care about that. I genuinely don't. And I understand like, oh, it's bad habits, whatever. Those one-on-one reps aren't real. That's not how it happens in a game. You are never going to be in a situation in a game where you have to worry about the entire field. You have no helping coverage at all from any direction. You have no sideline to work off of. And the receiver can just go wherever he wants. That's not a situation that happens. So I'm going to give the cornerback a little leeway in terms of, you can grab a little bit, be a little physical. Because what I want to see is that you can plaster on a guy, that you can keep contact with him, that you can stay in phase with him to the point that you can make a play on the ball. Because what he's trying to do is create separation. And, a little hand fighting, fine. You don't want to get in the habit of holding, fine. I want to see the coverage. And that's what he did. Like he was able to stick with Chris Olave and get his hand to the ball 3 different times. Like he's making plays on the ball 3 different times. Because I don't care if you're holding Chris Olave, he's probably gonna make the catch anyway. Right? And I think he did get in Chris's head a little bit. So, I'm okay with that. I want to see Alontae be physical. Yeah, there's a balance, yes. But you can't play like an outside corner in the slot. You have to be physical because so many of those matchups are going to be physical. And so I don't know. Like I liked what I saw from Alontae yesterday, and everyone wants to be a referee on Twitter and react to those like 1 or 2 clips they see. But anyway, I'm really just going in on this because I gave him a hard time in the earlier episode this week. So I do want to give him credit for going out there on Wednesday. And I thought he was impressive.
When you talk about the clips that people are being, referees on it, what is it? They're thinking like it's too much holding on it.
Yeah. I mean, like he catches a shoulder and, as we mentioned, Chris thought he was being held. So I get it. But I in those reps, it's not about, okay, this is you can't do that in a game. These reps don't happen in a game. It's the same thing with offensive line reps. Like a lot of times you're working on something and you don't know what that is, like as a viewer, unless you ask, like, are you working on pass sets? Are you like, what kind of pass set? Are you working on, okay, I want to, I would have a double team inside here. So I just want to make sure I don't lose on the outside, or vice versa, right? Like if I know that I can ride him around the edge because the plays go in the other direction, I'm going to do that, right? So it's tough. Like you don't know exactly what it is, and I always get a kick out of the offensive line technique experts on social media. It's amazing how many there are.
A lot of coaches out there, right?
Everyone seems to understand exactly what a pass set's supposed to look like, and yeah, like, and it's such a funny reaction because like Taliesin Fuaga, for example, like I tweeted one video of Chase Young just burning him in a one-on-one rep, and the response like, oh man, Saints are in trouble. Well, except if you talk to anybody on the Saints, they'll be like, he's one of the best looking rookie tackles I've ever seen. I think he's just having trouble in that matchup. And I think a lot of guys are going to have trouble in that matchup. It's kind of foreshadowing, but it's just a good example of like, just because you see one clip on Twitter of someone getting beat, that doesn't mean that's what the entirety of the offenses look like. You have not seen a single clip of the offense. I know you haven't, because we're not allowed to record it. So
I wanted to ask with Fuaga, it seems like everybody just calling him Tally now.
Well, that is his nickname.
Okay.
Like it's just a shortening of Tally yesterday. Yeah. But yeah, it's just fewer syllables. Can't complain about that.
I was just wondering because everyone's just saying Tally. I just didn't know if it was generally, accepted as the nickname.
Yeah, I think that's what he goes by. It's just like me going by Jeff.
Gotcha.
Anyway, that's it. Anything you wanted to talk about before we move on?
Just one question. What do you think about, I know the situation at running back with Kendra Miller's a bit of a mess with him still being out, but I haven't heard much about Jamal Williams at all. Any kind of updates on how the veteran's looking right now?
He's doing the job. It's tough at this early. Yeah. We're doing a little bit of third down work, so he wasn't as incorporated over the last 2 days, right? Because he wouldn't be the third down back. I guess he would be in pass sets, but again, it's like it's tough to know. I think he's looked good in pass protection. You're not, you're hitting, but you're not really hitting. Yeah. So thud tempo, whatever you want to call it. I think he's looked solid. It's just tough because I don't know if he really is a wide zone back, and that's what the Saints are going to do a lot of this year. So we'll see how that looks. I think he's looked fine. I haven't had any concerns about him, but it's just a question of, hey, do you give him the RB2 reps or do you look somewhere else for them? Yeah. And the fact is, right now, without Kendre Miller out there, it's hard to look at him and see it's hard to see a scenario where he's not the RB2, just in the sense of you're not going with, even if you look like, oh, I want Jordan Mims out there, right? I would love to see Jordan Mims get an opportunity. I don't want to see Jordan Mims be the only option, So we'll see. But yeah, he's looked fine. I feel like he's going to be a guy who plays in the preseason this year. We'll have to see how that looks, but I haven't seen anything concerning from him, if that makes sense.
There's been a few clips of him doing, his typical, you see his personality more than I've been seeing his play. So I was just wondering, I'm like, he seems to still be having a good time, being a part of this team. I just hadn't heard any positive, things from the field other than, him standing behind Cam Jordan making faces or, doing any kind of other funny shtick.
Yeah, I mean, that's just training camp, right? Like, you don't typically hear a lot about the running backs in training camp unless they're the superstar guys like Alvin or,
right.
And it's because, I feel like running back is a position where you really make your money by like breaking tackles and doing all that. And I'm never sure what a broken tackle is in training camp because it's like they weren't going to tackle him anyway. James Robinson has the running back play of camp, in my opinion, because he had a stiff arm on Shamar John Charles that just like stole his soul from his body. Like I don't even know how to describe it. It was like a pure Madden stiff arm, like the animation in Madden where you stiff arm a guy and you just like you decleat him and his like feet are over his head. It was like that. And like Shamar just like laid on the ground for a minute. Like he wasn't hurt or anything. It was just like the fuck just happened? I'm glad they couldn't record that. But I'm sure they played that back in the meeting room, at least in the running back room, maybe not in the safety room, because or the cornerback room, because it was a nice stiff arm. I think James has looked solid too. They have some options at running back, not good options, but yeah. But all right, let's wrap up that segment. We're going to come back. We're going to hit 3 points. And it's going to be, we talked about a good bit already, but we're going to dive more into it, get into a lot of that stuff. Who dat? This is Inside Black and Gold. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. I'm out in Irvine. He's in, lost it there. He's in Louisiana, having a good time. It's early in the morning. Haven't had a ton of coffee yet, but I'll get there. All right. Who dat? We'll be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak here alongside Steve Geller. We went through kind of the rundown, the injuries in the last segment. This segment, I want to go through 3 points. And it's not about the kickers, although we did see Charlie Smith the other day. He missed from 59 twice. I don't know why they're having him kick from 59. They're not having Blake try from 59, but whatever. We'll go with that. Blake is like 23 of 26 in camp, maybe 25 or 28. I can't keep track, but they're both doing fine. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about field goals. We're talking about 3 points. And one of them is that my expectations for Chase Young were kind of hard to nail down.
Yeah.
In terms of, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know when he was going to be available, when he was going to be ready, what he was going to look like. Boy, whatever I expected was a lot lower than what I've seen. Because for one thing, this man is different. Like, his body is different. His size is different. His speed is different. His strength is different. Just it's hard to even explain until you see it in person. Because Taliesin has been excellent in every matchup, but when Chase Young lines up out there and he just gets burnt. And he's learning. But one of the things that stands out is just the size. He's 6'5". All these other guys are listed at 6'5". It doesn't seem like they're the same. Like Chase or Carl Granderson jokes like, "Hey, I'm taller than him. I don't know what you're talking about." But you see that guy line up, and here's a couple of clips of guys kind of talking about that dynamic of when they see him out there. Because even Dennis Allen, when he was asked earlier in camp, what stood out to you about Chase Young, and he was like, "Well, he's a lot bigger than I expected him to be." But this is Pete Werner, who actually played with Chase at Ohio State, kind of talking about, his first few days of camp here.
But I've never seen a guy get off the ball quite as fast as he has, so that's exciting. It brings back memories to us in college. I'd only have to cover for a few seconds, and all of a sudden there's a sack. So hopefully we can enjoy that. He's a great kid, so I'm excited to see a lot more of him.
Dennis talked about his just physical presence, just how big of a guy he is. Are you shocked as you see him in person, how big he is?
Yeah, it really doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, I look at myself, and he's over there, getting ready for practice, and I'm thinking in my head, man, if I had that body, or it's different.
It's different. One of the funny notes I have is I always get a kick out of hearing NFL players refer to other NFL players as a great kid. They're both 25. They're both 25 years old. Pete Werner's a 25-year-old man. They're like, "Oh, he's a great kid." Just, I don't know. I get a kick out of that. But you hear that, it's not normal. It really isn't. And I could hype him up as much as I want. He's delivered on that hype. I don't think I could overhype him at this point.
Yeah, it definitely seems, at least from my vantage point back home here, that he's kind of exceeded expectations out there already.
No question. And Dennis Allen said that, they had a timeline for him and he beat that timeline.
Yeah.
They came into camp and there was an idea of when he might be back. And, he met with the doctors and they were like, "Yeah, he's ready." I mean, he didn't have any limitations. They're ramping him up mainly just because they don't want to, he hasn't worked. It's not about the neck really, why they're ramping him up. They're ramping him up because he missed a lot of the offseason work. He didn't get there for OTAs, minicamp, or at least not on the field. So they're really just trying to make sure they don't overload him with stuff. So he ends up with like soft tissue injuries, stuff like that. It's really not about the surgery at all. Like he's cleared from the surgery. But here's another clip of Taliesin Fuanga talking about it. And again, these matchups have been fun to watch. And take from this what you will. Chase Young has lined up exclusively over the left side of the line. We have not seen a Chase Young Trevor Penning rep. I think they might be protecting it a little bit.
You talk about devouring souls and crushing people. That he might be able. Chase might do that to Trevor.
Yeah, it's not worth it right now. It's not worth seeing what happens. We're still early, but this is what Taliesin had to say.
I think he's a great player. He plays with some speed and power. He has like a lot of different tools he could use. He's a big dude. I ain't really seen players like that in college, so it's just it's a blessing to go against a guy like that. He's good.
Yeah, just watching from the sideline, it does seem like that size even at the defensive end position is different. Is that when you kind of line up against that? Obviously, just the last 2 days in terms of team drills, is there? Do you have to kind of lock in a little bit more when you see it? Yeah,
I'd say you got to lock in, but it's just being able to just go out there and just play your game. It's just a mentality, I would say.
Is it a wow moment, kind of like your eyes kind of get big when you see how, wow, this guy's a big dude I'm lining up against?
It's definitely like, wow, this is Chase Young, or like Carl Granderson, or wow, this is Cam Jordan. But at the end of the day, I just got to play my game. It's like a boxer's mentality. You can't really be afraid of anybody.
Yeah, and this is a 6'5", 300-pound, 215-pound man talking about it. I'm excited for Saints fans to see Chase Young out there. I really am. And
what is it about him that everybody just says he's so huge? I mean, you look at the numbers, obviously 6'5", 260 something. He's a big man too, but it just seems, I don't know, is he just wider that makes him so overwhelming?
He's got really long legs. And so like his base is so big. I think he's got kind of a small torso for his size. And so like he's able to generate like speed and power in ways that I don't think everyone can. Because it's not just the size, it's the quickness. It's how quick he is off the line at that size. So he can use power moves, he can use speed moves, he can go around the outside, he can just bull rush a guy back. Like you're going to see matchups this year that he just dominates. And the question I have is, okay, what is your role for him in a pass rush group? Then this is kind of the second point, is like, should we be excited about the pass rush or should we be concerned about the offensive line? And one of those questions I have is, okay, what's the role? Is he going to be a pass rush specialist? Are you going to get him on the field for, I don't know, second and long, third and long? Or are you going to try to get him on the field 3 downs and maybe take it away from somebody else? I think this pass rush group has a chance to be special. I really do. And I think that the depth of this group, where you would say probably Isaiah Foskey is your 5th best defensive end, a guy I'd argue has had a pretty solid camp. That's a good problem to have. And like Tano Passanio is one of your more consistent performers, and he's not out there. And I still feel like this is the deepest pass rush group they've had. I don't know, maybe since like the Super Bowl years. Like I don't know if they've had a better pass rush than this over the last decade. And I include that I include the Trey Hendrickson, Cam Jordan year, where both those guys were firing, because I don't know if you had guys behind them that could produce the way they. Like, I don't think you had a third pass rusher in that group that really, scared anybody. So yeah, I think, we'll talk more about that in bold predictions, and we're talking a lot about this because this is the thing. I think that pass rush group has a chance to really be the main variable of like, okay, why can this season be better than last season? Yeah. What can actually improve? And why would we feel more confident about this group than we did about last year's group? And it's the pass rush.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, injuries are the biggest question mark with a guy like Chase Young, and you still with that defensive end group too. Even Peyton Turner, all things have been great right now, but how long is this guy going to last during the season? I know is a big question for everyone. Yeah, and that's the nice thing is, if he gets out there and he's productive, great, but it's not going to kill you if he doesn't. Like that was the issue with Marcus Davenport. Is like you were saying, okay, he's a question mark, and if he's unhealthy, they're going to be in trouble. Like if Marcus can't get out there, who's replacing him, right? And you didn't really have an answer. And so you ended up having Cam on one side getting double teamed and no one on the other side. Carl Granderson was kind of developing, but he wasn't the player he is now in those seasons. So, I think that's a big thing. So the second point is, okay, should we be concerned about the pass rush? And I'm sorry, should we be concerned about the offensive line?
And I understand why. Like, I understand you're seeing all these reports like, oh, the offensive line is getting burnt. Like, I think they were close to 20 sacks in Wednesday's practice. Now,
that's going to make people very concerned, Jeff.
Yeah, no, I understand. And it's tough because you don't know exactly what would have been a sack, what the quarterback have worked his way out. I would say in that sense, there was 20 plays where I would say there was significant pressure put on the quarterback.
Right.
Again, you have to look at it and say, well, this is kind of a patchwork group. You didn't have Eric McCoy, who I would argue is your most consistent player on that offensive line. You didn't have Lucas Patrick, you had Lucas Patrick at center, so you didn't have him at guard, who I think Lucas has looked solid throughout camp. I think he's going to end up being your week 1 guard, even when Nick comes back healthy. And then you obviously have the tackles who are learning. So yeah, you're going to struggle on the offensive line. That's just kind of how it's going to be. But you are still early in your installation. You haven't installed much beyond the base. Like you're getting into third down stuff. You haven't really looked at goal line. You haven't really looked at 2 minutes situational stuff. So you're limited in what you're running. A lot of the misdirection stuff that worked on days 1, 2, and 3 was not working on days 5, 6, and 7. And I think it's like a product of, hey, we've seen it, we know what it looks like, and we're going to get it. And the defenses you're going to go against in the regular season are not going to have the luxury of going against your offense every day for a week prior to playing you. So you kind of have to take that for what it is. The defense is ahead of the offense right now. And that shouldn't be a surprise. This defense has been in place for a long time, right? How long has Dennis Allen been here? 2016, 2017? Like, this defense has been the same. So, like, they are ahead. And the defense should be the group that carries this team. So I would be more concerned if this brand new defense was absolutely dominating if this brand new offense was absolutely dominating a defensive group that we should expect to be better than the offense. If we're still seeing this in 2 weeks in terms of all this pressure and everyone's back healthy, that's one thing. But I was able to catch up with John Benton, Saints offensive line coach, Mike Triplets to my left. So if it sounds like I'm changing my voice mid-interview, it's because he sounds slightly different than me. But here's what John Benton had to say.
Benchmarks you look for in camp at this stage? I mean, can you tell if it's going well, especially when you're installing with a new group, I guess?
Yeah, I think it is going well. And credit across the board. I think the buy-in has been outstanding. I mean, we had some great blocks by receivers today. And that's another thing we talk about. One guy has to carry the ball for us, so it's 10 versus 11. We're going to use all 10. Getting off old line track, but here.
Yeah,
there's buy-in where I think we understand what we're doing. We obviously need more details and that type of thing. But overall very pleased with where we are.
Did you guys find something in Lucas Patrick? I can see he's doing more every day.
I think so. He's been having a very good camp, and very pleased that he is. I think he's moved himself from battling for a top backup to battling for a starting position at this point. So.
How valuable is that to have a veteran who can play multiple positions?
It's not just valuable; it's mandatory at this day and age. We're probably going to end up by the end of the season. Just if it goes like every other season I've been in the last 10 years, we're going to play with 8-9 guys during the course of the year. So to be able not only to have 9 quality guys, but be able to take, if you lose one, take the 6th best guy and play him wherever you need to play him, and not disrupt 2 other people because you have to move positions. And that's immeasurably invaluable, and that's how we train too. We're going to cross-train everybody.
Gotcha. And yet we saw, through OTA's minicamp, it was a pretty static group. We saw a lot of consistency, and the last couple of days, today in particular, there was a good rotation. Is it important to be able to do both things? Right? Like, obviously, you want that group
100%
to be 5 strong, but
correct. And I try not to mess with who we think the starters are, because they're refining what they're doing. It's going to be the backup we need, you don't want all his reps at left guard, and then you need him at right guard. So. And during the spring, first time through the offense, we're not going to move them around a ton. But now that we've got it all in, we got to be able to start cross-training and that type of thing, just for the same purpose we started with.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What, I guess, and I'm sorry if I already answered this.
No.
On a day like today, there's a lot of pressure. How do you go about making corrections on that with young players? Obviously a rookie left tackle, Trevor Penning at right tackle, without kind of undermining like the confidence, because there's obviously stuff that you need to fix.
Sure.
While also this is when you make mistakes.
Sure.
How do you approach that?
Yeah, you focus on what happened, why, and what needs to happen differently. Not going to be out here screaming and yelling unless you're being lazy. As long as you're working at it, we're going to be fine. And that is how you learn too. You learn from those. They're not injuries, but when you get beat, that's what you learn from. If we came out to camp here and we're 100% successful, I don't think we'd be ready for day one. Thankfully, we're going against a very good defensive line, and those scars are going to make us tougher.
Gotcha.
Hope I explained that well.
No, you mentioned the impression with Chase Young made on you. I mean, we're seeing the same thing.
Yeah.
You've been with a lot of teams. Are there very few defensive linemen built that way?
Oh, 100%. He's a premier player in this league and has shown it out here just in this brief time. And particularly him. I mean, there's been a lot of elite pass rushers. I don't know that there's many elite pass rushers that are that big that can really exploit you so many ways with power and with speed and that type of thing. So he is a handful now. If you set light on him for his quickness, you're going to get run into the quarterback, and if you set firm, he's going to jump around you.
Yeah, he's rare. I can't compare him to many of the Saints we've had.
Yeah.
Parts of him, yes. But
Yeah.
It's kind of scary to see him come out like second team reps. You see the number 2 pick in the draft, all of a sudden he's here against the backup to the backup.
It's all right. He's working his craft too, so I guess.
Yeah, so that was John Benton, new Saints offensive line coach. I really do like him a lot. Like, he's a very very friendly guy. Seems like he has a good approach. What I asked him about at the end there, that is a funny thing. Like, again, you talk about the offensive line pressure. Like, you got Peyton Turner, a first-round pick in the third-team reps, going against guys who are not going to see the field. Like, you're talking about, like, Chandler Brewer is trying to block a first-round pick. And that's why the depth of this group is special, right? Like, Chase Young going against your second-team backup, left tackle. Like, that's not normal. That's not what you typically see. But yeah, I mean, I think his approach to particularly the young players is what I like, because I don't know if Doug Marrone had the right temperament or approach for a young player like Trevor Penning, who is struggling and needs to be led to water, right? Trevor has been working with Teron Armstead this offseason, which I think should help him. It was at Masterminds down in Frisco. They have a camp. And, one of the things he talked about the most was like, yeah, okay, the technique is important. You got to work on the technique. But the mental side of it, and I think I talked about this in an earlier podcast, like, you're going to make mistakes. This is when you should be making mistakes. That's why I'm not overreacting to, training camp videos, one-offs of one-on-one drills, because it's like, okay, that's the tape that you mark down as teach tape. Or I guess you wouldn't call it teach tape. Teach tape is what you would use in as an example, but you mark it down and you say, this is what you need to fix, right? Like, you did something wrong here, fix that and do it again and fix that. And one of the things that people have talked about Trevor this year relative to, okay, why should we feel differently about him this year, is his approach to those corrections. Eric McCoy talked about this. Like, the confidence level is there, and it's not necessarily getting shaken every time he gets beat. It's like, okay, what I do wrong, I'll fix that. And so we'll see. I mean, but I think that one of the issues that Trevor had last year is that wasn't happening, both within his own brain and with the coaching, was, hey, okay, what are the fixes I need to make and how do I make them? And then those actually being followed through on, and the positivity being kept up. So I don't know. Hopefully John, is able to do that. And I do appreciate his approach so far.
No, you mentioned with last year, there seemed to be a clear disconnect with what was going on in the coaching room with the offensive line, especially, you mentioned, the young guys, like especially Trevor Penning, not being able to get on the field at the end of the year when there were so many injuries piling up was just mind-blowing. And it just seemed like, I don't know, Doug Marrone, for whatever reason, didn't get along with Penning and just ended up tossing him to the side almost.
Yeah, he got fed up with him, and it was just like, I can't do it.
I'm done with you, right?
And I think that was honestly, it's funny because, I think that was short term what Doug needed to have some success with that group. But in the long run, it's probably what got him fired, because they needed someone who could work with Trevor and develop a young player. And I think that in and of itself proved that he couldn't do that. So it's just like, I think the Saints offensive line might have improved to some level, or probably did improve to some level when they moved on from Trevor, but it was a decision that cost Doug his job. And so we'll see how that goes. One more point, third point.
Thanos meme. It's like, what it cost you? Everything.
Everything. Hashtag Thanos was right. Okay, one more point, and it's a more concerning point, and I have serious questions about the wide receiver room, and not necessarily the top end guys. Like, I think Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed are going to be fine as your top end duo. Everyone behind them, I would put a big old question mark on. And like, we've been really excited about Mason Tipton, right? We've been talking about him a lot. One of the reasons we've been excited about Mason Tipton is because he's the only one that's doing anything. No one else has showed up. Now, obviously, yeah, Cedric Wilson has been dealing. He had an injury yesterday. Equanimeous St. Brown has been out 2 days with a hamstring injury. Terrible, terrible time for him to miss time with a hamstring injury, because this is when you need to be going to make a roster. But like, I would argue that if I had to pick the third best wide receiver, I guess, it would be Mason. It would be the third best performance so far in camp as a wide receiver behind Chris and Rashid. I would have to say the fourth best, like the next guy on that list in terms of actual production, has been Stanley Morgan. Now,
okay, so what's happened with AT, man? I mean, I know Dennis Allen said yesterday, he was asked, is he taking a step? And he's like, yeah, he's taking a step. I need him to take a jump.
No, that's Isaiah Foskey said that.
Okay, it was Foskey. Never mind.
Which I thought was funny. It was like, okay, is this like a space thing? Are we talking about like Buzz Aldrin or not Lance?
Never mind, man. Okay.
Yeah, one small step for wide receiver, one long leap for offensive lineman. No, but it just and again, I'm not throwing shade at Stanley, but Stanley Morgan was brought in as a special teams ace, and I think he's going to make the roster as a special teams ace. He had a rep yesterday that was like, okay, I get it. Poor Lawrence Johnson. I mean, it was a gunner jammer rep, right? Well, so you're a gunner. It's a 2-on-1. You got to beat the guy. You're trying to split him. I mean, Lawrence never got more than 15 yards off the line of scrimmage. He got blocked into the dirt by Stanley. He was talking shit the whole time as he did it. I was like, whoa, it was a Bobby Abrams, like, whoa. So like, don't take this as me throwing shade at Stanley. Take this as me being pleasantly surprised by Stanley as a wide receiver and a guy I expect to make the roster as a special team. Anyway, but A.T. Perry, yeah, I have that clip from Dennis Allen queued up here. So let's listen to it, because as you mentioned, it was you make the determination.
Perry taking a step forward, backwards. So where is he right now?
Well, yeah, I would say I wouldn't say either one. I'd say he's kind of holding steady right now. I'm kind of waiting to see him, do something that's going to jump up and catch my eye a little bit. Certainly we've seen some other guys, step up and make some plays, some guys that maybe we might not have expected, but I think, I think AT's doing fine. I do think that he's got to, do something to take that next step and make one of those plays that's going to kind of catch our eye a little bit.
So you say he's doing fine. What you've seen of other guys is doing it fine enough to make this run?
Well, doing fine in anything's not gonna end up cutting it, and so, yeah, I mean, he, along with a lot of other guys, have to do some things to, catch our eye and impress us, and so I'm still waiting on that from him.
That was the dig that I was thinking Dennis Allen took at Perry, not the other one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, Foskey, I think I understand what he's saying there. Like, he's taking steps forward, but he hasn't taken that second-year leap that necessarily you want. So that's what you were thinking of, and it was the play on words of like step versus leap. Yeah, great. But yeah, when your coach is out there saying, yeah, he's been fine, it's not a good look. And what I will say for AT is he's been a gamer in the past. Like we were having the same conversation about him last year, and he went out in preseason opener and caught a touchdown from Jameis, and it was like, whoa, where did this guy come from, right? So there is the level of that. But like I do feel somewhat vindicated because when I put out the guys who had slow starts, he was the top guy on my list of like the training camp dud to this point is AT Perry. So when you hear the coach being like, he's been fine, that is something. But yeah, I mean, I don't think he's guaranteed to make the roster. Now, someone's got to make the roster. And right now, I don't know who those are going to be, but nothing's really blowing me away at the wide receiver position. And here's the thing, like you got two sleight of frame wide receivers in there. You've got a guy in Chris Olave who has been injury prone. Now, I'll give Chris Olave a lot of credit because even though he has been injured a good bit, he's played. Like he's fought through injuries, so he's a tough guy. Like he had that ankle injury that he played through in week 17 of last year against the Rams or week 16 against the Rams that I think he was maybe 50%. Like he was a shell of himself. He still led the team in catches and yards, right? He had the hip injury on Tuesday. He was back out there on Wednesday. So like even in OT minicamp, he was playing with a red jersey because he had a shoulder injury, but he was playing. So I will give him credit for that. But you've got a guy who might miss some games. And what happens if Chris Olave and or Rashid Shaheed miss a game? I don't know who takes over. So it's going to be a question.
No, and I mean, obviously there's still a lot of folks been wondering why haven't the team, gone out and gotten Hunter Renfrow. I don't know if that's the answer or maybe something they do end up visiting.
Yeah, I would not be surprised at one bit if they bring in a veteran option. I think you're getting close to that point. I would be. But all right, that's the end of that segment. We're going to come back. This is Inside Black and Gold. We're going to hit you some bold predictions. Who dat? I'm out in Irvine. Steve's hanging out in Louisiana. My weather's better.
My food's better.
Yeah. All right, and we're back. One more segment to go here on Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. Steve Geller. Training camp, baby. Yeah. All last week, I thought that the preseason game was this weekend. I was like, oh, the Hall of Fame game, then the Saints play. No,
one more weekend.
No, oh, sweet summer child. We have a whole nother week before the preseason game. Feels like I've been here for months. I've gotten to the point where I can actually fall asleep in a hotel room. That's my biggest issue when I go on the road is I can't fall asleep in the hotel room, but I live here now. So I'm actually going to sleep at like normal times.
Do you have to FaceTime with the dog at all or no?
Well, the dog doesn't have thumbs, so she has a hard time operating the phone. But I do FaceTime with my wife, and she'll usually hand the phone to the dog.
I figured you're doing that, but I was just wondering if the doggo ends up coming in.
Yeah, you got some good quality time on the phone with the cats and the dog. Yeah, and then I talk to my wife occasionally. She doesn't really care.
Right,
but,
exactly. It's like, all right, put the pets on.
Yeah, but okay, we're going through it, and we're going to hit some bold predictions heading into the 2024 season based on what we have seen in camp. And my first prediction, I don't even know if that's bold, but I genuinely do believe this. Like people have been asking, okay, is the takeaway from the first week of camp that the pass rush is really good or that the offensive line is really bad? Now, it obviously doesn't help the offensive line that they are not a top 10 group, but I don't think we are just seeing a really talented, or I don't think we are just seeing a average defensive line beating up on a subpar offensive line. I think we are seeing a elite caliber defensive line beating up on a kind of finding its way offensive line. And so my bold prediction for this season is Saints are top 5 in sacks in the 2024 season. And it's really not that crazy, even though you're talking about a team that finished 26th with 34 sacks. The team that was 5th was the Colts with 51. So you're saying basically one more sack per game. And you go from 26th to 5th. And I really do think that this team has a chance to do that. And Chase Young's going to be a big part of it. Carl Granderson is going to be a big part of it. I think Cam Jordan having a bounce back season is going to be a big part of it. And then if any of those guys miss his time, Peyton Turner, Isaiah Foskey are there to fill in the gaps. We've seen Chase Young and Peyton Turner in NASCAR packages. I don't want to face that. Like these guys are. I'm excited. Like I grew up watching the Giants, right? And you look at those like 2007 Giants team that beat the Patriots. You know, you're talking about Michael Strahan, OCU Manora, guys that can get upfield. Like you would throw that later team, that 2012 team had Justin Tuck, and they would throw him in the NASCAR package, and you would get after him. Like I feel like that's the type of defensive line this group has. And we haven't even seen Brian Brzee out there. And he's going to be a pass rush guy. So I don't know. Like I would, that's my bold prediction right now. Saints are top 5 in sacks, you know, and maybe even higher. Like you're talking about 51 sacks last year was top 5. I think it was 59 was number 1. So you're not that far off. Like there's really not that much separating number 1 and like number 10. And there's really not that much separating number 15 and number 26. So that's my first bold prediction.
That is definitely bold for me. I mean, I still have some questions with the group just because Cam's up there in age. Yeah, I think Granderson is still could be an ascending player, but then I got those injury concerns. Obviously, Chase Young, Peyton Turner, and then still the unknown of what is Foskey bringing. But I'm believing what you're seeing, and I'm hoping that ends up being true going into this year.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm just being rose-colored glasses, but like, this is not the type of. Like, it's not like we see this every year. This is not a normal thing for this group. And, you know, you're the Saints and you're looking at that Chase Young investment. You're in day 7 and you're basically seeing a full participant. Like, you gambled on that move.
Right.
Like, you didn't know how that surgery was going to go. Like, you signed him before he had neck surgery. And you knew that the goal was to get him back at some point in camp. Not on day 1, not on day 6, at some point. On day 6, he's in team drills in full pads, getting a majority of the reps. That's a huge win. And the guy, and you're not only just getting Chase Young, you're getting 1-year prove-it deal Chase Young. You know,
that I like.
That's an unusual thing. You know what would have been, like the Saints would have loved to get C.J. Gardner-Johnson on contract year C.J. Gardner-Johnson, right? They couldn't. He wouldn't play through it, right? It's difficult to get guys in that mode because why? There's like, sign me. I've already earned my deal. Sign. Well, he is in, okay, I need to have a monster year this year so that my next contract, probably not even with the Saints, is massive. So, like, you are going to get motivated Chase Young. So if you get healthy and, like, top-end motivated Chase Young, whew, I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited. I'm fired up about it.
Yeah, like I said, I just know, obviously, unfortunate history with his body breaking down. Hopefully that's not the case. I'm not worried about the neck. I'm just worried about something else becoming an issue.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like last year, his big issue was the neck, you know? And yeah, he had the knee injury in his second season, and that, I think it took a while to come back from that. Yeah, I mean, injuries happen. Like you can't, all you can do is get healthy before the season and put your best foot forward. We'll see. But okay, let's move on. What is your kind of first bold prediction?
My bold prediction is the fact that Taysom Hill, I think, will end up being the leader in catches in the tight end room. I just not confident. And right now, I'm not seeing Juwan Johnson obviously out there. Foster Moreau is who he is. And I like, obviously, the reports we're seeing about Dallin Holker being, you know, someone that's standing out, doing some impressive things at camp. But in the end, I think, you know, with all the different things we've heard about Taysom being able to do, it's still going to come down to him being that number 1 guy in the tight end room.
So, yeah, I mean, well, the only thing I would say is I don't know if I would say Taysom Hill is in the tight end room, but I still think your take works in the sense of like Taysom Hill is going to have more catches, yards, and touchdowns
than any of the other tight ends, right?
Juwan Johnson, Dallin Holker, any individual tight end on the Saints roster.
Right.
I agree with that. I think that's a good take. And I don't know how bold it is, but it's definitely a prediction, and we'll see. You know, what I will say for Juwan is we saw him running yesterday for the first time. Now we've seen him out working. We've seen him kind of catching balls and moving around. This is the first time I've seen him running for any extended distance. I don't even know if I'd call it a full speed, but it was, I don't know, maybe 80%, right? And that's for a guy with a foot injury who's coming back from foot surgery. I shouldn't have to explain why getting cleared for running is a very positive development in your rehab. So we'll see if he can get back week 1. That prediction gets a little dicey. If he's healthy week 1 and he is a part of the offense, but if he's not, then you're 100% on, in my opinion.
Well,
my only question is
he's a little behind, obviously, learning this new offense too, as well, and that's maybe a minor point there.
Yeah, he was there for OTAs, so he did get some of that work. But no, yeah, I agree with you. And we saw what Juwan did last year. It was not anything that blew you away. So
right.
So we'll see. But the only question I'll have is, okay, is Taysom more involved in the run game this year? Not the QB power game, the actual run game out of the backfield than he was in the past. And does that take away some of the reps you might have had downfield last year and so forth? So that would be my only question. If he's blocking a lot more, then you might lose some of those reps. But I agree. I think Taysom's going to be all over the place in this offense. It's just going to be on Clint to kind of find creative ways to use him.
No, I'm excited about that just because we know the weapon that Taysom is, and I know he had career numbers a year ago, and I just think he can even eclipse that going into this year.
Yep, agreed. Okay, one more from me. And it's I don't even know. I'd say it's a bold prediction because anytime you're cutting the 3rd round pick from 2 years ago, it's a bold prediction. But my bold prediction is Jordan Mims makes this roster over Kendre Miller. Now, that doesn't mean Kendre gets cut. But if you were making a depth chart and you decided to keep 4 running backs, Jordan would be 3rd, is my take. And that's just because we haven't seen Kendre. And at what point is he just a non-factor in this offense?
And you just heard, I mean, it's very rare that a coach goes out the way Dennis Allen did, and you heard the disgust in the way he addressed the injury and what's going on with Kendre.
Yeah, and this is how we talked about Jordan. Wait, let's
own scheme. I think that's a run that he runs pretty well. I think he understands what those tracks look like. I do think he's got some good vision in terms of how to run that play, and so you buy yourself a little bit of time to make the reads, as you're taking this, wide zone path. That buys you a little bit of time. And look, I think our guys have done a really good job of really teaching exactly what we want these things to look like and exactly what we want this track to look like. And there's plenty of video examples of, hey, look, if you run the track exactly like this and you do it time in and time out, here's where the cuts end up being, and so look, I just think he's taken to that. He's studied it, and I think he's done a good job.
Yeah, and so I mean, we talk a lot about Mason Tipton. I think we've talked a good bit about Jordan Mims. You have guys who are producing over guys who are not producing, and for AT, it's just been kind of invisibility, and for Kendre, it's been literally not here. Or at least not on the field. He has been at practice watching. And so I think the tone there is telling, and it's telling of a few things. It's telling of, one, the expectations for those guys, for AT and Kendre, were higher. So they had more they had to prove, and they haven't done it. But it's also, these are guys who have done the work, have showed up. I wonder what the conversations were in, 2005 to whatever year Pierre Thomas got kept over Antonio Pittman, right? Where we're talking about, man, they should have stuck with the draft pick just because of the investment, or we look back and wow, that was a good decision, right? If you didn't do that, and who's to say whether you even win a Super Bowl, right? He was a key piece of so many of those teams and so many of those elite offenses. So you're not just keeping a draft pick because he's a draft pick. Now, if he's a 1st round pick, maybe even a 2nd round pick, it changes a little bit because there is more guarantees involved. In the 3rd round, you're not really guaranteed anything. Other than the team's invested a pretty high pick in you. So we'll see. But that's my bold prediction. Again, it's not a prediction that Kendrick's going to get cut, but I think it is a prediction that he can get surpassed on that depth chart pretty quick.
Yeah, definitely. It hasn't been good from the get. We've mentioned, obviously, flashes from Kendre, but man, oh man, draft night when he called into WWL and, touting to even Deuce McAllister told him to slow your roll, young man. It was coming in. I'm coming for that number 1 spot. And I was like, I guess, that passion or that belief in yourself. But man, his ability to just stay on the field has been a big problem.
Affirmative. I agree.
And yeah, that you can't make the team if, what do you say? You can't make the team in the tub.
Can't make the team in the tub unless it's like a really nice tub.
and you invite everybody.
Yeah, unless you brought it to share. You just brought everyone a tub to lane. All right. Do you have any other bold predictions, or do you want to hear my final one?
I'm trying to think. I'm glad you brought up the running back, because I feel that way as well, that I don't even know, honestly, if a spot for Kendry's guaranteed. And we I mentioned it earlier with a possible wide receiver or a running back veteran being brought in. I still think the Saints could be looking to do that at both positions. And there's a few names out there running back that are interesting. So curious to see if they end up making that move to bring another RB into the, for the depth at least.
I mean, you could bring in like a Devontae Freeman type.
But
right?
I have heard, some of the younger guys that are behind too have been shining as well, including Jacob Caboti even.
Right. Like you could bring in a veteran. Like remember they brought in like a Terrence West, David Johnson.
Yeah.
The guy last year, I can't recall his name. They always tend to bring in a veteran guy down the road, but they almost never make an impact. So I do think you're going to probably stick with the guys on this roster. And even if you're just bringing in, a guy, but James Robinson is a guy that no one talks about. I think he's a little too slow. That's my only gripe about James. He's not fast enough, but either way, we'll go. My final bold prediction, and it's kind of the opposite. I know Bobby does not agree with me, but my bold prediction is that Trevor Penning starts all 17 games, and he is, drum roll, fine. That he is serviceable. That we do not go to the end of the season and say they lost all these games because Trevor Penning sucked. That's my bold prediction. And I know it's not saying much, but I genuinely think there's a starting caliber left or tackle in there. He's a right tackle now. And he's going to make mistakes. Got to let him play through them. Like that's the thing with Trevor is he's not going to be perfect. But I've watched Joe Liuto out there and he has been far from perfect. He's not a guy I want to start either. I think the upside with Trevor, particularly in this offense where he can be an asset in the run game and get out in space and use that athleticism, is going to be a factor. So that's my prediction. And I know people are going to be hating on him. There's that one clip of him getting beat by Carl Granderson where he kind of got put on skates a little bit. Sure. Like these are good pass rushers. You kind of trial by fire, whatever. I think Trevor's going to be your starter all season. And he's going to be, again, fine. He's not going to be a Pro Bowler. He's not going to be a guy you look at and be like, oh man, he's a star. But we're not going to be talking about him nearly as much as we did last year. And I think you're going to find ways to help him, protect him. And we're going to go into next season saying, okay, contract year, what do we do?
No, the fact that you're saying that you expect him to play all the games this year, that to me is, a bold prediction in itself. And yeah, I mean,
it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be a bold prediction, but it is.
Right, because just obviously the history with his feet, and you don't want an offensive lineman with bad feet. So I'm hoping he can hold up, plus be serviceable. I know it seems like a lot to ask.
Yeah, I mean, if Teron Armstead is telling you that he thinks this guy can be a starting tackle in the NFL, I trust him, right?
I trust Teron.
And again, it's like the athleticism is good there. It's all in his head and it's all in his feet. My biggest gripe for him right now is I think he's overthinking because he's trying to get the footwork right and he's not using his hands. And what I want to see him do is just be more physical, manhandle some guys. Now, obviously, you don't want to get penalties. What?
I said, he's got it in him to have that nastiness to him.
Well, that's the run game you're talking about. I'm talking about in the pass game. Like, I want to see him get his hands on guys. Like, you don't want to get holding penalties. You don't want to get outside their frame, but you got to get there. You got to be aggressive. You got to be violent. And I think a lot of times he's just worried about getting to the spot and he forgets that, hey, I can just get my hands on this guy and toss him around. I think that's what, once we see him connect those two elements, I think, because like he's not getting beat off like his kick step has been solid. It's just, okay, what do you do from there? Once you get to that angle, you got to get to him. You can't just get held off or get run around. And that's where it is. But that's my final prediction is that Trevor's going to start all 17 games for better or worse. We're going to see it.
I'm definitely hoping that bold prediction comes true because this team definitely needs it. Obviously, the O-line issues they just seem to be getting magnified more in camp, and we talked a lot about it this podcast. Hopefully, that doesn't end up being an issue, a continuing issue going forward. I know that the early struggles. I agree with you. This defense should be ahead of the offense right now. It's a brand new scheme, whereas DA's kind of had his system entrenched here, obviously.
As Clint Kubiak would put it, it's been a couple of character building days for
that's
for
a nice way to say it, right?
You got to build character. Hopefully it turns. I think it will. I think we'll start to see this balance out a little bit more. But it won't stop people from their doom and gloom takes. It just
they were around beforehand, so it's getting even worse now.
Away. Like nationally, everyone, like we're talking about, like, the backup quarterback is the 37th best in the NFL, right? Stupid stuff. I mean, I'm tired of people who don't watch anything having like these super strong takes. And I get, you can have takes, you can have all the takes you want, but like we have these aggregator websites who literally do nothing. They get their information exclusively based on people who have been there, but then they don't actually like interpret that in the way that it's intended. They're like, well, I saw one pass from Spencer Rattler. He's a star, and I like Spencer. But like you see these sites are like, he's turning heads. And shut up. Get over yourself.
No, the whatever narrative is around Derek Carr, they're just dying for him to fail so Spencer can rise to the top.
They're playing into the vibes that exist. They're playing into whatever. It's like, okay, people are going to engage with Spencer Rattler content. I'm going to tell you whatever I need to tell you to make you engage with the Spencer Rattler content.
Right, because it's not getting the hot clicks.
Yeah, so I don't know. Like, we didn't really talk about the backup quarterback battle. It's raging. If I hadn't already made the bold prediction of Nathan Peterman, I think having a chance to be the backup quarterback, I probably would have thrown that in there. But we literally last time we were on, we talked about it way too much. I didn't want to overhype him. He hasn't really been that good since I made that prediction, dude. Either. But again, like for the same reason as last time, like I think there's a chance you get to week one and you're like, what if we actually have to play these guys? What are we gonna do? So we'll find out. But anyway, that's it. That's the tweet.
Now go enjoy your day off.
Yeah, I'm gonna go duck hook some balls into the woods real quick. Get stuck in a sand trap. I don't even know what clubs I'm gonna use because I didn't bring clubs. I think Deuce found me some clubs, so hopefully, that's gonna be my excuse. Like, these
clubs, I'm not used to them.
Yeah, the carbon fiber. I need aluminum. Yeah. But all right, who dat? Go Saints. Thanks everyone for listening. If you haven't subscribed yet, why not? You've been here for how long and you haven't hit that subscribe button? What's wrong with you? Are you okay? Should we do a welfare check? Because I don't want your cats to start eating you if you died with the podcast playing. That wouldn't be a good advertisement. Yeah, we found her 3 days after her death, and her cats had gnawed her to death, but she was halfway through a podcast about the Saints. Anyway, that's it. Who dat?
Who dat, everyone?
Go Saints. Be easy, y'all. Peace.